Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchitananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase Om. So, welcome to our section on Ayurveda. We're going to be discussing many different aspects of Ayurveda as we go through this module. And the most important thing to know is that this module is meant to be here, or this theme is meant to be here to be applied. So many of the previous modules that we've gone through are, especially when you're beginning your yogic studies, often very much based in the theory. We're understanding the philosophy and the history of yoga. And now we move into the science of life, the science of Ayurveda. So what we're going to be discussing in this theme, we're going to be covering the treatise of Swami Shivananda and his discussions on health and disease. We will then go into what Ayurveda actually is, why Ayurveda is so important for living a balanced and healthy life. What is the source of prana in our solar system? We'll take a look at the three gunas, which are tamas, raja, and sattva, the three qualities in which reality can manifest, all of life can manifest. We'll then go in and have a look at the sattvic diet and lifestyle, the panchatattva, the five elements, how these elements work in and out of balance, a basic understanding of the doshas or the temperaments. And then we're going to have a look at some yogic routines, daily routines for healthy and happy living. We'll get a glimpse of the Shatkarma Kriyas, which we don't have capacity to go into in a 200-hour teacher training, but which are dived into in later teacher trainings as well, more advanced teacher trainings. These are the traditional 6 ancient purification techniques of Hatha Yoga. We'll have a look at some daily practices, such as cold showers, Ishnan, Abhyanga, self-massage, oil pulling, body brushing, tongue scraping, and more. We'll also have a look at fasts and monodiets, natural rhythms and cycles of nature, and how we can adapt to those. So there's a lot that we can really enjoy in the study of Ayurveda. So we're going to jump right into it, getting started straight away. Please make sure that you take notes and that you start your exciting exploration of Ayurveda in your own studies and research into this absolutely fascinating field of the science of life. So we begin with a basic study and understanding as to what Ayurveda is. Ayurveda is an ancient system of health and nutrition, and sometimes what I call the sister science to yoga. They really do work hand in hand, and Ayurveda and yoga kind of need to marry together in order for both of them to take the most beneficial and sacred effect that they can within the body, mind, spirit connection. The word Ayurveda comes from the word Veda, which means a knowledge or a science, and Ayur meaning life. So Ayurveda is the study of the science of life. I wish we had studies of the science of life when we were growing up in school, not just the anatomical studies like we learned in biology, but the entire system of life, the universe, the elements, the planetary movements, how food works in our body, how breath and movement affect our body, how the seasons and cooking affect our body, and the different temperaments that we as human beings have in the unfolding of our unique individual personalities. So I suppose in its most simple way, simple form, and please remember that studying this course doesn't equip you to be an Ayurvedic practitioner. Ayurvedic practitioners are very often doctors of Ayurveda and need to study the same amount of time as a Western medical allopathic doctor at universities, mainly in India, although there are a few in different parts of the world as well. So if this is something that interests you, you can do courses in Ayurveda, but you cannot actually be an Ayurvedic practitioner because you need to have a medical Ayurvedic degree in order to do so. In South Africa at the moment, no tertiary institution offers Ayurvedic training. The most simple way that we can think of Ayurveda is kind of a system of lifestyle, nutrition, and balanced living that keeps our internal world aligned with the external world. So if asana is the movements of our body and the pranayama is the breath and the dharana is the focus and the dhyana is the meditation, the pratyahara is the internalizing of the senses through practices like yoga nidra. Ayurveda really points us to a little bit of more the environment around us in our external world and how that balances us with the internal world. So some of the easiest ways for us to do this is by what goes onto our plate. What do we eat? And what do we allow into our body? And when do we allow it into our body? At different times of the day, at different times of the year. So what I would like for this module, this discussion theme, is for us to have practical tools in which to implement the magical system of Ayurveda. And then if this interests you, if this intrigues you, then jumping deeper into this study in your own time, in your own way. Why is Ayurveda so important for us as yogic practitioners? Well, mostly Ayurveda is important for every human being to understand. In modern nutritional wisdom and science, we're told this is the way, and this is the way for all people. So it might be a paleo approach, and now they box everybody into a paleo approach, or a keto approach, or a this approach and a that approach, without taking into account the constitution of a person's dosha, their temperament, the balance or imbalance of different elements that might exist within a person, which can change throughout a person's life. A person is not necessarily fixed to one dosha or temperament. As people travel and live in different parts of the world, have different lifestyles, the balance or imbalance of the elements within the body can shift, can adjust, change. When we, as practitioners of yoga and meditation, look at Ayurveda, we're also looking at the effects not only on the body, but the energetics and the mind as well, which a lot of nutritional systems don't do. Ayurveda is absolutely, without a doubt, the oldest system of healing and nutrition that we have a record of in the world. So when we practice yoga, it's important for us to realize that our bodies need to be in a specific state of well-being before we practice asana that will enhance energy movement in the body. If we are consuming toxic food, living in extremely toxic environments, not cleansing ourselves and purifying ourselves, then the asana will sometimes even have a toxic effect on the person's well-being. Enhancing and amplifying is what asana does. So if we enhance and amplify constant increase of toxicity in the body, then that might actually lead to illness according to the yogic scriptures. So the body must be clean, it must be well balanced. And this is what Ayurveda is teaching us, not only to that we literally are what we eat, because the food that we consume becomes the cells, it becomes the energy of our body. It literally makes our body up. This is why in the koshas we call the physical body anamaya kosha, the food body. So this physical body is literally made from the food that we consume. And when you were in the womb, your body was being developed from the food that your mother consumed. So we literally are what we eat. Going in from there, not only the effect on the body, but the energetic effect and the mental effect. So for example, if a person is living an erratic lifestyle, is it no wonder that when they sit in meditation, that they struggle to keep their mind in a place of sattvic stillness, of sweet, harmonious stillness? If we're living off of stimulants and artificial supplements and energy drinks and coffees and things like that, sugars, refined products, is it such a wonder that we struggle in our mental processing and exercises like meditation and asana to get the best out of ourselves? So sattvic or harmonious diet is what we call the yogic diet, and it maintains harmony, what we call sattva or balance in the body, But because the body and the mind are connected, they are mirror images of each other. What we do to the body, we do to the mind, and what we do to the mind, we do to the body. So whatever we take into the physical self ripples through the koshas and affects the pranamaya kosha. So it affects your energy body, your energy levels, how much energy you can put into the world and get out of life, into manamaya kosha, into your mental sphere. Is it no wonder that people have depression and anxiety? If we look at what is on the plates, the refined products that people are eating, the lack of understanding of when and how the body should be eating according to the different times and cycles of the day and the seasons. You know, in the ancient, not even that long ago, you could only get oranges in winter, and that was what our body was meant to eat, was an orange during winter, citrus during winter. Now you can get oranges all year round. So we've lost the connection to nature. And, you know, just because our society has lost the connection doesn't mean that our body knows that. Our body is hundreds of thousands of years, some would even say more than that, of evolution. And it's only in the past 50 or so years in the industrial age that we've changed and shifted to refined produce like we have now. So it's a blip on the radar of our entire evolution as human beings, what we're now putting into our bodies and the way that we are. So your body doesn't understand why you are eating foods that were only meant to be eaten at different times of the year or in different locations of the world, because they're now available everywhere. Mother Earth was so intelligent that she grew different things in different parts of the world at different times of the year, so that she could provide the sustenance and the prana that was needed for the creatures that live in that location, in that locale, in order to sustain them and to give them good life. Now we just have so much access, too much access to so many different varieties of food, and the body doesn't have an understanding of this necessarily. So there's a ripple effect on what goes in our plate, goes into the body and goes into the mind. This is important for us to understand as Ayurvedic, I won't even say practitioners of our own Ayurveda, of course, you know, are walkers of the path of the science of life. So before we dive into the depths of Ayurvedic theory, let's first have a look at what is prana. What is prana? So in our solar system, living here on planet Earth, we have one source of prana in our solar system. And that source of prana is the sun. The sun is the source of prana in our solar system. The sun is the source of a life force energy in our solar system, because no other celestial bodies around us contribute to the life force energy in the way that the sun does. The moon can reflect the life force energy of the sun. The plants need it to grow, the tides, the whole of this earth needs the raw energy that the sun provides. The prana that comes from the sun enriches our world, and it takes on different forms and different shapes. One of the best ways to illustrate this is through the process of photosynthesis, which you learned about in school. So here we have direct light from the sun, and that light, through the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of the plants, combined with the carbon dioxide and the oxygenation process, combined with water, sunlight is converted into pure source of fuel for living beings. When we eat a beautiful ripe mango or a sweet strawberry, we are eating distilled sunlight. That sunlight is converted through a miraculous process into the food that we consume. And so the food that we consume, especially in the form of plant foods, plant-based foods, are the closest that we can get to direct consumption of sunlight, of prana, in the way that our body can understand it and assimilate it in a natural way. If we look at this picture over here, we've got sunlight, element fire, water, element water. We've got the minerals of the ground, element earth, and we've got the air exchanges over here. All right, the fifth element, space, akash, is the theoretical space that all of this exists in. Some say spirit, some say space, but it is kind of the volume in which everything is contained. Everything needs space in order to exist. But there is also a life force energy that exists in all of this, an intelligence that exists in all of this process. So the source of our solar system, on our planet, the source of the prana is the sun, the source of all life. And this is why the sun has been worshipped since the beginning of time as the source of all life. What was originally thought of as the sun god later became known as the son of God in later religions, but always given the prominence of the light, the way, the truth, and the light. The light being always symbolized in religious art as a source of goodness, a source of light, a source of vitality, a source of power. The monarchs of old were always crowned in gold to represent the light of the sun. We can see sun imagery going right back to the beginning of humankind, because it is perhaps the moon which regulates. She regulates the mysteries of nature. She regulates the movements of the tides and the cycles of the growth of plants. That it is the sun, the king of our solar system, who is the director of the whole thing. He is the one who provides all of the raw power. And the moon, she influences on a subtle level what's going on. So we can, when we talk of energy, when we're talking of life force energy in yogic terms, in Ayurvedic terms, we're not talking about some invisible metaphoric substance, all right? We are talking about the same energy that you learned about in school. Prana, or in China called qi, or in Japan called ki, and various different names in different parts of the world. This life force energy, as we learned in school, can take on a few different forms. Can you remember what they were, for those of you who did a little bit of science in school? We had the different forms of energy, which I'm going to pull up here for you now, that you might remember. And if this is new to you, that's also fine. So we've got the energy of light, okay? And even here, physics says that all light originates from the sun. The moon doesn't have a light of her own. The planets reflect the light of the sun. So it is stars that radiate the raw power of light. So we've got light energy, what we call radiant energy. Then that is converted into the rest of it. Okay, so through having light energy, for instance, let's go down here to chemical energy through food. So food we take in the body, our body through its intelligent processes converts that food into chemical energy. Now there are four base elements that exist in the periodic table, which we'll talk about just now, that relate to the four elements as well. But let's have a look here. We have kinetic energy, the energy of motion. So in order for me just to be able to talk to you now, to move my hand, to move my body, I need to, it's consuming energy. It takes energy and it produces energy in the space around me. My body gets hot through movement, and that leads to heat energy. What we also get from the element of fire, for example. So there is heat energy. There is electrical energy, which is what human beings have learned to harness, but nobody really even yet knows fully what electricity is. We know how it can be generated, we know how it's used, but no one really understands what it completely is. Sound energy, which is something that we're very familiar with when we chant mantra. When we're chanting our mantras, we are producing a ripple effect of sound that affects our cells, that affects our environment, it affects our reality. We have potential or stored energy. So this is another kind of energy that, for example, if in this little picture, there's a little boat sitting on the edge of a waterfall, it has the potential to fall down. It contains potential energy, stored energy. Even something like perhaps like sugar contains energy that is stored, and then your body can release it and convert it into energy of heat and motion, convert it into sound. All right, and maybe an energy here that they haven't put yet is thought energy, and then we've got nuclear energy as well. So these are different forms of energy, different forms of prana that can exist in the universe. But we also have a few others in the yogic teachings that science hasn't yet caught up to. For instance, what I said, manas shakti. Manas means the mind. Shakti is that energy of the mind. So mental energy, for example. So the prana takes on various different forms, and just keep in mind that the source of prana in our solar system is the sun. That we could think of as a basic unit of energy that we utilize in yoga, all right? And then from there, we have the four elements of nature. Now, I'm going to pull up a picture here of the 4/5 elements, but just give me a second to find it. Okay, so here we go, the 4 foundational elements in which the raw manifestation of prana can take shape, can also be moved and as conduited. The 4 primal and foundational qualities in which all of this world can manifest. So we call them earth, air, fire, and water. Now, first we're going to look at these 4 elements just for the properties that they are and the way that we understand them. So we've got earth, which is obviously the soil and the plants and the trees and the mountains and the food that we consume. And it is related directly to the physical body, the skeleton structure of the body, the bones, the heaviness of the body, and also the waste that comes out of the body in the form of fecal matter. It represents the densest forms of the body, like teeth as well. But when we also look at earth not only as the soil and the plants and the food, but earth also as a principle of this universe, then earth is no longer soil and plants and food, but earth, the element, represents, it is a principle of everything in this universe that is solid, that is unmoving, that is heavy, that is stable, that is grounded. It has an energetic form of heaviness as opposed to the lightness of air or the erraticness of fire or the coolness of water, for example. So earth is the earth that we can see in nature, but it's also a principle of reality. It is an energy current. Anytime that a person is feeling heavy and lethargic, that is an earth principle of the body. Anytime a person is feeling angry or frustrated or irritable, it's a fire principle. Okay, so then we've got also the element of fire, of course. Element of fire is the fire of this world, the candle flame, the heat that cooks your food. But in the body, it's also the thermoregulatory system. What heats the body through the food that we consume, the chemical processes of the metabolism. So the metabolic and thermoregulatory system of the body is ruled by element of fire, what in Sanskrit we call Agni. Agni is the fire. Okay, and it's here at Manipura chakra, at the solar plexus center, at the navel point. That's where the fire comes from in the body and radiates out. Also, the oils of the body are given a fire quality because oil is used to enhance the principle of fire. So we often give oil the quality of fire as well, not necessarily water, although it can be with its liquid form, but because oil increases fire, it's one of the reasons why ghee is sometimes used in Ayurvedic cooking, and consumed maybe with food or before food to stimulate the digestive fire, to put some oil on there to increase it, to enhance it in little bits. All right, and then fire outside of electricity and flame and the raw heat of the sun and the heat of the body is a temperament. It is quick and igniting and combustible and enraging and transformative and heating. So anything that is heating, quick, electric, dynamic, we would say has the principle of element of fire. So good qualities associated with fire might be, transformative, energetic, courageous, powerful. Nothing can stop it. It gets what it wants. It's our willpower. It's our ability to move and to exercise and to win the race. But on a negative side, it can be angry. It can be consuming. Nothing can stop it. It can be destructive. It can be overwhelming. Too much heat, too much fire in the body can lead to things like stomach ulcers, high blood pressure, and heart attacks. Excess heat in the body. Whereas in too much earth, for example, leads to heaviness, tiredness, lethargy, inability to perform. Fire could lead to too much performance. Okay, so we see how these polarities are starting to work here. Whereas in the earth is feminine and cool, the fire is masculine and hot. We also have element of air. Element of air is also a masculine element. It is light. It is what we breathe. So whereas in earth can be representative of the physical matter of our body and our food and everything that is heavy and stable, and fire is the heat of the body and also the heating principle inside food, such as chilies and spicy foods and gingers, and the actual fire that we cook our food upon. The air is the air that goes into the body, into the cells, into the blood system of the body. It's our body's ability to breathe. We don't just think of the air as going into our lungs. The air is absorbed by the lungs and carried into the body. But air also has the quality of mental qualities as well. So we think of air as relating to the element of the mind, the principle of the mental sphere. So it's not only just the sky and the wind and the breeze, but it is things like our words. It is the thoughts that we think. It is communication. It's poetry. It is our ability to speak. These are all principles of air, the intellect. And we see the air in things like studying and learning. These are also air principles. Okay. And then finally, the feminine element of water. We give the feminine association of water. Please remember that this is not male and female. They are polarities, masculine and feminine, yin and yang. So we could think of fire and air as being yang in property. Okay, if we were using Chinese Taoist terminology, yang, masculine, dynamic, electric, ha, and then the lower elements, the yin, the feminine, the cooling, the magnetic, the lunar, the ta. Okay, so ha and ta, the balance of the elements. So water in nature is obviously the rain and the dew and the seas and the rivers and the lagoons. And it's the water that we drink, and it's the water that makes up the liquids inside of our foods. And the water is a conduit. So when we cook something, we cook it with water so that we can add spices and flavors and salts, because the water is a container and it's a conduit for heat to move through. If we just put the spaghetti directly on fire, it will burn. It must go into water onto fire. So water is a conduit for much energy and power. And it helps things to move and to travel. So water is fluid, and therefore it represents the fluid principles of this universe. It represents the ability to cool, to soften, to soothe, and that's on a positive front, to heal, to transform. You can come up with many words for water: to clear, to cleanse, to quench. But in its negative principle, it can drown, it can absorb us, it can overwhelm us, it can be too emotional, it can be, it has no fixed structure. It takes on the form of whatever it is around. So maybe it lacks its own identity at times, or maybe it's just fluid, maybe it's just adaptable. And these are not judgments, these are just qualities of the elements. The water in our body is obviously the liquid parts of our body: the tears, the saliva, the urine, and the blood, and other liquid forms inside the body. And so this is how, and on a more higher level, the emotions as well. So earth, the body; fire is the will, the drive, okay, the ability to get things done; air, the mind; water, the emotions. So these qualities manifest in many ways in our universe, and they are seen as the four fundamental elements of all of life. All right, but we must see them not only as physical representations like a candle flame, but as principles. They are the principle of all life. We can see here, this is an alchemical design from the ancient Greek teaching, that these elements also have certain combinations. So for example, fire, we give the qualities of being hot and dry. Air, the qualities of being hot and moist. I prefer moist to wet, moist. Water is moist and cold, and earth is cold and dry. So these are four basic understandings of polarity that manifest in this world. So for example, if we had to look at a person's body and see that maybe the skin is cold and dry, then we might think that perhaps there's too much of an earth element in that body. And perhaps they need either a little bit more fire or a little bit more air to balance them out. So we would kind of look as to maybe what is the opposite. Okay, don't get too bogged down by this. It's just kind of starting to think of balance. It's starting to look at the idea of balance of the elements within us. If perhaps we thought of our temperament as being cold and moist, cold and wet, the person's always clammy, or perhaps they're always freezing, they're always really, really cold, then perhaps there's an imbalance of water or earth. If a person's skin maybe is hot and dry, then there might be an imbalance of fire in the body. Okay, hot and clammy, hot and moist, an imbalance of the air element within the body. So you can see how just by looking at this, we could, and this is where medicine started. This is where Western medicine started, by the understandings of these elements and their interactions. Later, the different mixtures of the elements took on the different humors of the ancient Greek. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, and he said, we've got these different, temperaments: sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic, and what's the other one that I'm looking for? Phlegmatic, sanguine, melancholic, and I'll have to have a quick look. Give me a second. So I found it here. I just went completely blank. So choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. These were the four temperaments of ancient Greek medicine. Don't worry about this now. I'm just wanting you to start to get an idea as to the balance of elements within the body, and that they can constitute different temperaments within us, what we call the doshas in Ayurveda. Now, these four fundamental elements from the elemental table that we learn about in school in chemistry carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. These four elements make up most living things, including you, all right? Including you. You are made up of four base elements. Yes, there's smaller compositions of minerals and elements within you, but the majority of you is made up of four base elements. Carbon. Carbon is what we would refer to in ancient terminology as earth element. Hydrogen as water element. Oxygen, the air, and nitrogen, fire. So these four base components of your being is really the four elements that we've been speaking about since ancient times. In this image over here, we see a person standing in the form of a pentagram, a five-pointed star. The pentagram was always symbolic of the perfect balance of the five elements, and it was always seen as a feminine symbol, especially when combined with the sacred circle of life around. But we can also see the equal armed cross over here as symbolic of the four directions and the four elements. But when placed in a star position with the point up, it is symbolic of the triumph of spirit over matter. So we mustn't get ruled by the four elements. Our spirituality, our spirit dominates those four elements. And it is the spirit that this mysterious substance, that the akash, the space, the ether, the spirit, very mysterious thing, that is the glue that holds it all together. So now we can start to look at something like this. And I'm just going to touch on it now, and then we're definitely going to understand it a little bit more later. So I don't want you to worry about these words: cold, movement, light, transformation, and cohesion. Don't worry about those. Please just pretend that they're not there. What I do want you to look at are the five elements in the points of the star: air, earth, fire, and water, and ether, or akash. Now, it is through the combinations of these elements in a certain balance or imbalance, should I say rather, that we get the three doshas. The dosha is a temperament, okay? And we're just dealing with human beings for now. So the three doshas are temperaments of elemental imbalance in the body. So for example, if a person, this is not spelled correctly, kapta, okay, but just bear with me for now. We'll correct it. I don't know why that is spelled that way. I've never seen it spelled that way. Maybe it can be. But it should be spelled normally Kapha. So no T there. So it's pronounced kapha or kapaha. Kapha or kapha. In the kapha dosha, this means that there is an imbalance of the element of earth and water. When I say imbalance, there is too much of those elements present in the body, causing some imbalance of sorts. I'll explain what that imbalance might look like just now, but let's just have a look at the names. Pitta, pitta, often spelled P-I-T-T-A. Pitta is an imbalance of the fire and the water element in the body. Too much fire and water present in the body. And Vata, often spelled V-A-T-T-A. Vata is a combination of the imbalance of air and space, or akash, ether. Too much of those present inside the body. So we can be either one of these dominant, or we might be more than one dominant, okay, depending on the imbalances of your body. Let's just look at some simple understandings here. So this is a nicer image of the elemental constitution of the doshas. Pitta equals a combination of fire and water. Remember that this means that there is an imbalance of fire and water, too much. Vata is an imbalance of air and ether, too much. Kapha or kapha is the imbalance of water and earth, too much. Okay. So these three doshas can manifest in the following way, in a physical form. This is, again, not a rule. It's a generic approach. So vata temperaments tend to be usually quite skinny people, quite narrow at the joints. Often their joints can protrude from the body, be quite sharp. They might suffer from, they get cold very easily, very often prone to things like arthritis and joint pain. They can be highly prone to anxiety. They might either talk a lot or think a lot, extremely busy minds. Very often they suffer from constipation, and they don't usually eat heavy or large meals. They'd rather nibble and pick at food throughout the day. But again, these are generic look at. But usually you can see a Vata person as being kind of tall or skinny or gangly or wiry or quite thin, okay, by nature, by their dosha. I have seen larger body types that are Vata as well, but then there's usually a secondary component, like a very close up, what we call a primary dosha, your main, and then your secondary dosha, which might be something here. So not only are you ever ruled by one, sometimes you can be ruled by two doshas. Okay. Then Pitta dosha, the physical constitution usually looks quite athletic. They might have, because of the fire, a ruddy complexion or very red cheek, rosy cheek. Vata people often tend to be lighter in skin, often tend to anemia as well. Pitta people can have quite red complexions or hot skin, very often oily, and they often have an oily complexion. Sometimes their hair thins out when they become older. They are usually quite athletic, strong body types. You can just see the strength inside the body. They tend to, if too much imbalance, have excess acid, stomach acids. They can lead to anger and rage quite easily, quick-tempered, but often have a lot of energy and can therefore lead to burnout. Their stomach digestive system will usually work quite well. The stool can be sometimes a bit oily, and often they can have very strong urine as well due to the excess acid that tends to build up inside the body. So yeah, and sometimes even within Pitta people, the hair might have a slight auburn or reddish tinge. That sometimes can happen inside of the body as well when that little hint of fire is there. Also high sexual energy, okay. And then the Kapha dosha usually tends to be heavier in nature. They struggle to lose weight. They are more solid, grounded body types, not necessarily overweight, but just heavier in structure, in nature. You could actually see some Kapha doshas as not necessarily being overweight or having excess weight, but just having a really heavy skeleton, a heavy body, kind of very earthy, very present in the earth. Unlike the Pitta and Vata types who move very quickly, who think and act very quickly, and especially with Pitta are impulsive, the Kapha people are the slower on the uptake, slower to talk, slower to decide, slower to move, slower to make change. And therefore, they are great people who can follow through and implement the creative ideas that a Pitta might come up with in their excitement, or the intelligent concepts of a Vata. The Kapha person often has the ability to actually make that happen. They can implement, they can manifest and materialize things very easily. Within the body, they can sometimes lead to things like insulin resistance or deficiencies. They can gain weight easily, which is often a problem for the kapha. Because of the nature of the earth element of food, food often becomes a comfort for kapha. Whereas in a pitta person might resort to more stimulants. The kapha person might resort to food or to napping or sleeping as their form of comfort when they're in a stressed state. Many of the vata people I know end up smoking quite a lot when they're in a stressed state, and it often makes me think of the element of air, or they talk and think and frantic and wringing out their joints and moving around a lot. The pitta people might get angry, but they can also very often lead to stimulants and sometimes even substance abuse, and kapha tends to food and sleep. So the complexion here is usually quite balanced, but sometimes darker hair as well, and a tendency to lethargy, to tiredness. And in winter, this dosha really struggles to motivate themselves, to really get themselves going. Although winter is probably when they're maybe at their most comfortable in their body, because heat would probably, they would struggle with heat. Whereas in a pitta person might thrive in heat and not enjoy the cold. Vata definitely doesn't enjoy the cold. Pitta would probably not enjoy the cold, it probably needs the cold. So remember, just because we enjoy something doesn't mean we necessarily need it. We probably need the opposite of that, okay, to bring us back into balance again. So that's a little bit of a look at the kind of like a generic body type to do with the doshas. I've got another one here that's a little bit overboard, but it just kind of gives us a quick look at that. All right, you can kind of see the different body types. This is probably way too overboard for a kapha, but you can see that the pitta has quite an athletic nature and usually naturally athletic. Pitta can end up going to kapha easily if not handled properly or balanced. All right. But it's very rare that a vata can ever go to kapha. With a lot of change and work, vata could tend to pitta, but vata usually ends up staying vata. So remember that it's not good or bad, it just is. It's just the temperament, it's the balance of, or the imbalance of elements within the body. So if we know, for example, that kapha has too much earth and water, and they tend to heaviness, tiredness, lethargy, and being slower in nature, then they need things that are going to enhance the energy, to speed them up, to create lightness and lift, so that they can accomplish their tasks. Pitta needs things to cool them down, to soften, to kind of bring down the extreme temper and temperament. And vata is usually needing more grounding because they're a little bit too cerebral, too up in the air. So we'll have a little bit of more of a look at that in our next video. But this was just an introduction to Ayurveda and what is Ayurveda and why it's important for balanced and healthy living, the source of prana in our solar system, and the 5 elements. Okay. And then we will have another look in our next video and also we've understood a bit more about the doshas, but we're going to go further into this and elemental balances and imbalances in our next video. So stay tuned. Hari Om Shanti, and thank you.